listening to You Would Think, the Philadelphia Flyers podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Collington. Joining me, as always, Mr. Kevin Durso. Kevin, how's it going today, buddy?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing all right. You know, we're watching some good playoff hockey. The first round's done. We got the second round to get into a little bit later on in the show. First half's going to be a little bit of Flyers news. We had the draft lottery. You got some coaching updates, I'll say. But before we get into all that, make sure you're following the show on social media. We're at YWT Podcast. Kevin is at Kevin_Durso everywhere except for Blue Sky, where it's just at Kevin Durso. Make sure you find the show everywhere you find your podcast, including sportstalkphilly.com. So, all right, diving right into it. We did have a little bit of Flyers news. The coaching updates are pretty vague, so we'll start with the firm news first. The NHL draft lottery was on Monday night. It was kind of worst case scenario for the Flyers, to be honest, because the New York Islanders jumped 9 spots to claim the number 1 spot. The second lottery was won by the Utah Hockey Club, who may or may not be the Mammoth. And they jumped 10 spots, bringing them to number 4 overall. So the Flyers slid 2 spots and will now be selecting 6th. Kevin, we've talked about the fact that this is a top 6 or 7 draft. So is sliding from 4 to 6 really that big of a deal?
Probably not as big of a deal as people want to make it out to be. The problem is that you still lost what you set out to do. Like,
yep.
You know, and listen, I might as well just jump right into this part of it because I've seen pushback on this before because right away I sat there and I said the team with, as I put it, a 3.5% odds, chance of moving up and a 1.5% chance or just to go off of 10th best odds, 14th best odds. Those are the 2 teams that moved up. I don't want to hear about tanking again. Because obviously a team that finished 10th from the bottom and 14th from the bottom, we're not tanking and got the boost, right? And right away, what it's met with is, yeah, but the teams picking 2 and 3 did, and I'm sure they're fine with 2 and 3. You know what I mean? Or whatever. You know what? I'll level with you on that one. Because if all season long that's been your mantra, we're not good, we know we're not good, we're going to be bottom 3, then own it and be bottom 3. But you know as well as I do, every person listening to this show who pays attention to the Philadelphia Flyers knows they are not about that. They do not do it. They certainly weren't doing it with John Tortorella as their coach. And my point in talking about this was more about we were going back and forth for the last 2 weeks of the season over 4th, 6th, 7th, 9th. Don't be that spot, go as low as you can. And going as low as you can didn't amount to anything. So I don't want to hear about how bad it was that they won or lost at the end of the year when it didn't amount to what you wanted it to be and you weren't that team all year.
Let me push back on that just a little bit.
Sure.
I do think it's important, not for lottery odds necessarily, right? At the end of the day, we are drawing balls from a tub. But I think you put yourself in a better position because you finished 4th. The worst you were going to draft, which is obviously what came to fruition, is 6th. And I think that is notable because if you were sitting where the Seattle Kraken are sitting or the Buffalo Sabres are sitting, then you go from 5, 6, 7 to 8, 9, 10, 7, 8.
So here's the thing, because your point is the positive side of the argument that I feel like I'm getting in return. If you're sitting there saying I'm okay with it because they still did the job and got a better pick as a result of it because, hey, they could have finished 6th and still been jumped twice and now pick 8th. Yes, absolutely. I'm fully on board with that. What I'm trying to get at is that don't use 2nd and 3rd and San Jose, Chicago, and look where they've picked and where they are going to pick now this year at 2 and 3. Don't use that as your way of trying to advocate for something that the team didn't do for 3/4 of the year.
I absolutely agree with that.
Like, that's all I'm saying. Like I just don't understand. Like what I don't want to hear tanking about anymore is about the last quarter of the season when it was like, oh yeah, post-trade deadline. Now they're losing a bunch of games. Why'd they fire John Tortorella if it was going to mean they were going to win games and possibly mess that up? It didn't matter at that stage of it. The teams you're referring to, if you're making the counter argument about 2 and 3, are teams that were at the bottom of the standings from basically day one. And oh, by the
Now,
way, teams that have had the first overall pick before and it doesn't transform your team. So maybe we're making too much out of a draft where there's not even there's not that guy at the top of the draft this year. I'm not saying
that's true.
Matthew Schaefer's a nice player, Michael Misa's a nice player. No one's sitting there saying they are the generational guy. You're making an argument for is now that they didn't do it and didn't follow through, you're making the argument for you should do it next year for McKenna. That's where this mindset's coming from, is next year Gavin McKenna's the guy, and at the very least, you should be trying to get that first pick. But here's the counter. What if you don't? I dare you to name me the next two guys on the list that you're satisfied with if you pick second or third because you're shooting for McKenna. It's like the Patrick Kane draft. It was Patrick Kane and a bunch of guys.
Well, and that kind of leads me into my other point, right? So
Mm-hmm.
at the end of the day, you put yourself fourth best odds to get that first overall pick.
Mm-hmm.
Might have been sixth, might have been seventh. It ended up being fourth. You didn't spike, so you don't get to take the easy pick and take either Schaefer or Misa. So now, once those top two or three guys are off the board, now it comes down to what does your scouting department say?
Sure.
And obviously, as the Flyers, you kind of are going to take whoever's left, maybe Martone, maybe Frondell, whoever it is, maybe Desnoyers, whoever it is, you're going to kind of get whatever's left over to you. But
Mm-hmm.
if you were in that top, you know what? Honestly, even if you spiked and maybe you don't get the first pick, but you get the second pick, Schaefer goes, and then you kind of have to pick. And it comes down to
Yeah.
what your scouting department says. And it comes down to if you trust the Philadelphia Flyers scouting department. Because, I mean, what happened last time they picked second overall? And
Yeah.
obviously, that is a fairly rare case, but still, a high pick is not a guarantee of success. That being said, I definitely understand trying to give yourself the best shot, right? If
Well,
you end up picking fourth and you get the first bite at that next group of guys,
and
whereas now you kind of have to take what's left.
it goes back to something I've talked about multiple times on the show about this fear factor of putting the trust in people that I don't know that you completely trust, because you can make the argument that you didn't even feel good about second because you just want to have the first pick, because then you just show up and go best guy available, done.
Whoever we want, done.
Right.
Yep.
If Schaefer goes one and you're number two, now you're picking, sure, most people probably would say Misa, but maybe it's not that cut and dry. Maybe there's another center that you think you want more than that. And now you've got to pick the best center, who you think the best center is. And God help you if, you pick Misa and Hagens is the better guy by the end of in 5 years,
Mm-hmm.
because, it's the Cale Makar thing all over again, right? Yeah, maybe Nolan Patrick didn't seem like a bad pick when everybody else was also saying that's the guy.
It was the consensus choice.
Sure. I referred to one of the things I referred to it as well is, I don't care where you're picking in the top 10. It doesn't matter. You can be picking where, I'm trying to shuffle back on where everybody else picked now. Like, let's go Anaheim, right? Anaheim dropped at least one spot as well, right? So they're picking, I think they're picking 10th in the first round or 9th or something like that. They're going to get a player that when they draft and everybody's on whatever you pick the network, Sportsnet, on NHL Network or ESPN or whatever network is watching it, they're going to come on and tell you all of these good qualities about that player on draft day at 17, at 18, whatever it is, right? They're going to have good qualities, but is the guy going to be a star? We don't know that. Not until we really get into the throes of things, because you could make the argument just as easily. Okay, Nolan Patrick is the bust of the top 5 in 2017, but is Nico Hischier as much of a star as Cale Makar is? Probably not. Cale Makar is in another level, and then Hischier's probably that second tier all-star, superstar.
I might argue that Heiskanen is over Hischier just for longevity at the top level at this point.
Well, okay, and what I was building to more was the other direction, which was, how about the guy who went 5th? What's possibly going to happen to him? You know what I mean? All I've heard for the last year and a half is Elias Pettersson possible trade, right? and all these things, problem areas. Oh, he won't do this, or he might be moved, or there's a feud going on, or whatever it is. That's a 5th overall pick that everybody was thrilled about probably at the time. It's like, yeah, this guy's going to be a great player. And he has had great moments, but it doesn't make him out to be like the best of that draft class. There was a point in time where I think he might have been the best of that draft class for a small portion. And then it all kind of turned.
He was the best forward for sure. And I think
Yeah.
Nico is giving him a run for his money now.
Now I think, well, right. And I think Nico's back to that now, for one.
Yeah.
And I mean, like, you just start to weigh these things with, like, I always come back to, it's not about it's sometimes not even about the best picks in the first round. It's not that cut and dry either, where it's like, yeah, you know what, just pick a bunch of spots at the top and that's it. The Chicago Blackhawks are now going to pick their 3rd this year after 2nd last year, 1st the year before. If they don't make the playoffs again, or better yet, if they're picking in the same general area again next season, tell me how it's going.
Now see, I'm going to push back on you there. I think they have one more year left. Frankly, I think they won their draft lottery a little bit too early as far as their rebuild goes. Obviously, you're never going to turn down Connor Bedard, but I think they would have it. Ideally, you're drafting your number 1 overall superstar when you're ready to turn the page on that rebuild. And I think they just spiked a little bit too early. I'm willing to give them one more year. They got a lot of talent there. I think San Jose is the team that it's time to take a stride.
Well, and I'm not worried. And see, this isn't to talk about whether or not a team's going to take a stride or not. What I'm sitting here talking about is that if you still find yourself in that spot with Bedard generational talent, that team picked 2nd overall last year, and yeah, the player didn't start the year with them. Levshinov only played 18 games, so
something like
it's not
that,
a full season. I get it. I'm not trying to take away from that, but so you're back in that same position again, and okay, so you're going to end up with probably take your pick of Higgins or Frondell or Martone or Desnoyers or who knows. And here's the thing, right? Like, this is the fear factor thing. I'm bringing this back into the picture. This is the fear factor thing from the Flyers' perspective as well, is not only do you have to put trust in picking lower than 4th, essentially, like it's still no easy pick. Let's say they get Higgins at 6, that he falls. Doesn't the immediate thought, because it's just a crutch, and I'm not denying it or taking it away from people who feel this way. I understand why you might feel this way, but isn't it a crutch kind of to have a reaction of, well, what's wrong with him? Because you thought Nolan Patrick fell into your lap, and then there was something underlying with him that hurt his career. So with Higgins, it could be, well, what's wrong with him? Why was the guy who should have gone 1st now all of a sudden they're at 6? And it's not going to be, from a guy like that, it's not going to be as cut and dry as, well, he's Russian and he might not play for 3 years. You could have lived with, well, okay, he's Russian and he might not play for 3 years. Sure, why not? But
yeah.
But this is different. This is a guy who's right there under your nose. He's playing in college. So what's wrong? Why did he fall to 6? And then here's the thing. This is where you also hit the fear factor thing. You either have a guy like that who dropped, that you're going to at least worry about whether or not the potential is fully there. You're going to worry about it in some capacity. You might be happy that you get a guy like that. There were people who thought, what was it? The year that in 2022, when they took Cutter Gauthier 5th, Shane Wright was 4. And people were like licking their chops over, oh, don't tell me he's going to fall to 5. Don't tell me that's going to happen.
Yeah.
Well, and believe it or not, I thought I read somewhere recently that they tried to move up to 3 for Cooley in that same draft.
I did not hear that.
I saw something about that they were trying, which I totally understood at the time. But anyway, I digress with all that stuff. The other area where you run the risk is because you're entering the gray area and boards are going to look different. You know as well as I do, there's going to be 32 different draft boards at 32 different locations that are going to maybe have the same 2 guys at the top 2 and the rest are going to be all over the map. Some are going to have Higgins at 3. Some are going to have Higgins at 10. Some are going to have Martone in the top 5. Some won't. Some will have Desnoyers up there. Some won't. That's the argument that, like, where you're valid with it, where 4 to 6, what's the big deal? Because the guy they might have taken 4th might have been there at 6 too, because everybody's going to have different opinions. The area where you've got to somewhat worry about it is, what if you reach a little and take a guy who's a riser and maybe not as on the radar, because again, your own board is going to look different than other people's. Like, for example, the first name that popped in my head with that one was Jake O'Brien, because he was kind of the riser of the bunch, for a while. Then there's been a couple of things literally in the last 24 hours as the placement was formalized about Brady Martin, who plays for the Sioux Greyhounds. And nice player, nice numbers, not taking anything away from that. But I'll be honest with you, that's the first time I'd heard that name all year, referring to draft stuff. Jake O'Brien, yeah, I heard that one going back to the midseason. Well, and I've heard that one from midseason rankings. Oh, look, he's moving up, like all that type of stuff. I know people are also going to try to float out the thing with the other 2 picks in the first round and how maybe they could move back into the top 5 now, whatever. I don't know many teams that are thinking about trading, or not thinking about it. I don't want to say that, because San Jose did say they would consider it. I know I saw that, but.
Well, I have a different opinion, a different tack on that that's fairly similar here. What I was thinking is that we have mentioned a bunch of times that we do not expect the Flyers to make all of their selections, whether you're moving up, you're moving down, you're pushing picks into next year, flipping for assets, whatever you're doing. I'd argue that the Flyers might be more likely to trade the pick now than they were a couple of days ago when, if they had ended up at 4.
Trade 6, you mean?
Yes.
Okay.
And again, I have no knowledge. This is not any sort of report. I am simply speculating.
Are you strictly talking about a trade back?
No.
Okay, so you're saying either or, up or back,
or out for an asset.
Okay, valid.
I don't know exactly what the trade would entail, but if the major pieces are Elias Pettersson and that 6th overall pick, I think there could be a framework there. I know we've talked about some other names too. I don't know if it's worth 6th overall, but maybe you talk to Winnipeg about, getting the negotiation started a little bit early. Yep.
I don't know that I would ever move a first rounder for negotiating rights.
And that's why
if you had
it's not necessarily worth 6 overall.
Now if you had the framework of a deal in place for somebody who is,
I think you'd have to.
Like here's an example, and I don't know I'm not saying this is the guy I would trade 6 for, but let's just humor this. If you knew from Minnesota, I can get Marco Rossi under contract right now, and they will trade him to me with us having contract in hand ready to sign, and he's on board.
With at least a reasonable deal length.
Well, and
not a 2-year deal.
Well, because then it doesn't because then you skirt the offer sheet rules. It's not an offer sheet; it's a sign and trade. It's a different story. You got his right first, then you sign the contract. If you can pull that card, then maybe I consider 6 for. And that's why I said I don't know if Rossi's the player. Like, I might consider moving 6 overall for McTavish and do it with Anaheim and be like,
give Anaheim 2 picks in that zone.
But and I know that that's tricky, but if that's how you feel about getting a player right here and now, instead of because I hear where you're coming from with that. You're coming from a standpoint of you're taking a guy who's probably 3 years away, right? Like, you're doing work in progress stuff here, whether it's a guy like Frondell who's playing over in Sweden and you just focus he's going to be international for a little while, whether you pick another college, Higgins is probably closer than the rest among that selection, or anybody who's a college guy is going to be closer, because you can kind of Higgins just played his freshman year. Let's be real.
Like, Higgins might be closer just because he's built like a horse.
But I factor in that he's already played his freshman year. You send him back to college for 1 more year. Yeah, when you're done your sophomore year, sometimes you're thinking, I just want to go. Like, even if he is 2 full seasons away from being an NHLer, but you go 1 more year of college, AHL, NHL.
Yeah,
you could do that.
Yeah, and if you're still rebuilding at that point, maybe he comes up the last 10 games of the season and gets his feet wet type of thing.
Sure, whatever. But
But, you know, yeah.
but you've got those options, and then you've got the collection of guys that are in the CHL that it's, you can ELC them effective immediately, keep sliding it until you feel like they're ready, for the next 2 years until they turn pro, and then make the decision on minors or NHL. It's all relative with that type of stuff. I think you also have to. This is the harder part to do before the draft hits, because you're going to have to make this decision kind of with a little bit of hope in mind. But
Okay.
I didn't really create anything for this, so this will be our footnote touching on this. But you got a little playoff run going with the Phantoms right now, and the
Yeah.
Phantoms got some new life injected into them with, hey, Jet Lachenko season's over, he's going to come play, and
Mhm.
and I'm not taking away from the guys that came from up to down, like Emil Andre, for example, like who jumps back into an AHL situation after playing in the NHL for the last 3 weeks of the year. Like, good for you for being ready for that. I'm talking about, though, like an Alex Bump. Hey, you're playing meaningful AHL playoff games right now, fresh out of college. And I don't know what you're going to be next year. Maybe you are close to ready. You just played, had a solid college career. Are you ready for that next step? Devin Kaplan got that one game at the end of the year. Are you ready for a bigger step at that point? All those
That
things kind of factor in. And as you start to factor those things in, you're starting to wonder whether or not you feel like you're closer as a result of those guys, so you don't mind taking a flyer on another guy, or do you do what you're talking about, which is just go get the immediate proven commodity too?
Right. But
You know,
I have to say that Phantoms roster is kind of starting to remind me of that mid to late 2000s roster. The Carter, Giroux, like when
mm,
all these young kids were coming up, and maybe there's not quite that much talent there, maybe, but you have Luchenko, you have a couple other guys. By the way, Luchenko, 5 points in 5 AHL playoff games, all assists, but still, he's putting up some
he
good
came
work for
close to
them.
one. The one
Yeah.
assist is what came on a rebound goal. So you're
Yeah.
you're doing your part there. Bump kind of cooled off a little bit after the initial couple of games that he had, and that's okay. He's learning. He's still fresh to the
Absolutely.
AHL. Like Lachenko's got a leg up from 4 NHL games. Let's be real. Like, that even gives you a leg up.
Absolutely.
And listen, we're all watching equally. We're all watching with equal fascination as, hello, the London Knights have still not lost a game in the OHL playoffs as they go to the final. Now,
Exactly.
there's a contingency on that, because Denver Barkey got hurt at the start of I think it was at the start of the last round. So he missed the last 3 games of that round where they swept. So that's how, think about that. They lose their captain. That's how good of a team they are. Holy crap. But I've seen some good numbers from Oliver Bonk. So I'll throw that out there. I've seen some good numbers from Oliver Bonk. Um, so you just got to kind of you got to kind of roll with it with some of these guys, that these are guys who are graduating from all this. Bonk's going to be a pro next year,
Yep.
probably in the AHL, but still, it is going to be very worth it to a lot of people to keep an eye on that minor league team just as much, because that's going to have a lot to do with what happens going forward. There's a lot of things to take into consideration, but that is certainly a key part of this as they go forward. And I think that you bring up a good point, and that was a possibility I wasn't really considering, which is moving 6 for something proven.
And I think you're much more likely to move 6 for something proven than you would 4, right? 4, you kind of have your pick of that second bunch of
Yes.
guys. You can kind of do whatever you want. If you're Danny Briere, 6 might feel a little more movable.
And I think you would have to see how serious people are about moving the proven thing. And again,
Absolutely.
I think it really does potentially come down to, like, that group of guys that we've talked about among the offer sheet group. Like,
Mhm.
if they're possibly not renewing their contract where they are, like, and I brought up Rossi for a specific reason, because Rossi finished out the playoff run that Minnesota had on the fourth line, and
Ooh.
in his exit interview said, I know I'm a top 6 player. I know I'm not this, and I'm ready to prove myself. That didn't sound like a guy who, like, necessarily is going to dismiss, hey, if an offer sheet came my way and my agent says this is going to be a better opportunity for you, like, hello,
You
Philadelphia.
you want to play next to Matvei Michkov? Hello.
And the thing is like I liked what I saw from him in the playoffs. He was a solid player.
Okay.
I don't like is he the top tier of that RFA class or what was of the RFA class? No, he's not Wyatt Johnston, for example. But I don't know what he could be either. Like I don't feel like he's getting the fair chance in Minnesota because you're a little bit stuck at times. You're not Matt Boldy. You're not, and Kirill Kaprizov's on the wing, but you're not even, you're not that guy for a power play. Like on a power play, you want Boldy, Eriksson Ek, Kaprizov. Now you've got a bunch of defensemen who are power play guys. Like,
So Kevin, the gears in my brain are turning.
yeah.
We've talked about Danny Briere potentially being fairly aggressive this offseason.
Right.
Is there a world, and I agree that I think the possibility is fairly small, don't get me wrong here. Is there a possibility that you trade 6 for an asset, maybe a Rossi or something like that with a contract extension, and then you still RFA somebody this offseason?
No, because I think if you give up your top first this year to do something like that, you don't want to give up the other top first because you lose your 26 first if the money's too high.
What if you trade Colorado and Edmonton's pick for, say, 14? So you still end up with a pick in the top half of the round, or maybe you get a first. Maybe you trade one of those picks for a first round next year, or
see. And the tough part with what you're asking is that the deadline for basically free agency is right on that. So you're really going to 11th hour that thing if that's the way that it goes. And
absolutely.
Like, sure, if you find a way to get that creative that you move 6 for a proven player and then somehow package some of your other picks and get yourself another first rounder next year so you don't mind losing your own, then maybe I consider it. But I
Pick up
also
the phone, Danny. Pick up the phone.
Well, you know what? Well, you know what else though too? I think there's 2 things you're going to have to wait and see on before you really make that decision because one thing I will agree with you on with this, or at least one thing that I see if you were to move 6 to get a proven player, you're not moving it until practically draft night, if that's the case. I think you are keeping your cards close to the vest right up until the end where it's done, right? Like, and you're almost using the pick. Because you're holding on to it for so long, I don't even know who's out there at that point. Like, if you're getting close to the draft and we see in the weeks, it depends on who we're talking about because like right now, obviously Winnipeg's not going to do anything with Velarde right now because they're in the middle of the playoffs. So I wouldn't expect to hear anything now, but Rossi's out. Obviously McTavish has already been out for a period of time, like since the regular season was over. If you start getting down to the wire and McTavish is re-signed and Velarde re-signs and if Rossi's the only guy and you don't like the deal, then you're back to where you were before. And I think you're making the pick and you're focusing on we're not doing this. And it depends too. Like, what if that's the only guy that you even feel like you can trade the pick for? You know what I mean? Like Dallas got out in front of this conversation way before everybody else did and went, no, Wyatt Johnston's not even coming close to being part of this conversation.
I'm so mad at how stupid the Wyatt Johnson contract is. Oh, it just makes me angry.
Have anything to do with the fact that he just scored a Game 7 game winner?
Yep. Okay.
I know. We'll get to playoffs soon. I know.
Something that I just kind of thought of is one of the trade targets that we keep talking about here is Elias Patterson.
Right.
Do you think there's a chance Francisco Aquilini says you're not allowed to trade him to Philadelphia because of the Rick Tocchet situation? And now, for people who may not know, Rick Tocchet's contract was up at the end of this year. He let the team know fairly early on that he would not be signing an extension. Recently, they have essentially released him, allowed him to go pursue his other opportunities. They've announced that they're not going to be bringing him back.
Mm-hmm.
And there's been speculation since it came out that he wasn't re-upping that the Philadelphia job may be one that he is interested in / a candidate for.
Right.
And Vancouver management has a history, or Vancouver ownership has a history of, let's say, being involved.
Yeah.
maybe a touch on the petty side. Could you see a world where a transaction gets shut down for petty reasons like that?
I mean, sure. Can I see a world where it happens? Absolutely. I don't even know what their interest level would be on Pedersen at this point, or for that matter, like you don't even have to shut down an acquisition like that by being petty about it. You could just drive the price up for the team that's calling. If Danny Briere called Vancouver and
Well, that's what I mean, right?
and threw the 6th overall pick in there with insert this, insert that, like, I don't know, let's just play a game. 6th overall pick, Cam York, and next year's first also. I don't know. I'm just spitballing here.
God, all to get Pedersen here from Vancouver. These tariffs are the worst.
And on top, but what I'm saying is that and maybe what really gets it done is a first and a second or something like that, or you know what I mean, like
in a vacuum,
right. And it's like if they're driving up the price on you, I don't even know how interested you are in something like that, specifically with that player. Of course, you want a center. I just don't know if that's the center, and I feel like it becomes one of those, like, if when he gets dealt to whomever it is, I will be so thrilled when that is over because I'm getting tired of hearing about him. You know, the Tocchet part of that is way more interesting because it's way more realistic. Let's be real.
Well, and I was mostly using that as a transition to get to the coaching search.
Stuff. Sure. So I'll do the Tocchet stuff.
Tocchet has to be the lead name, right? At this point.
I don't know, honestly. I really don't know because like, will he get an interview? Of course he will. I don't like, you know what's interesting? He did not. I'm trying to match up the timeline here because he might have been on the market already before this happened, but it was I'll just say it was very close. The news that No, I think it did happen afterwards, actually. The Tocchet said he wasn't coming back. It might have been the day after Mike Sullivan got fired by Pittsburgh, and I find that timing interesting as well because Rick Tocchet was the assistant coach on Mike Sullivan's staff when they won back-to-back cups, and he did play for Pittsburgh as well. I just don't, and I'm not saying, of course, he gets an interview with the Flyers. He did the last time when they had a coaching vacancy, and he was available. It definitely happens, but I don't think it's as cut and dry as Rick Tocchet, you're the next coach of the Philadelphia Flyers. Done. End of story. You know,
well, and it is worth noting, in case people have missed the news, a name that we've mentioned quite a lot, David Carl, has signed an extension with the University of Denver, has established that he will not be coming to the NHL at this point in time. I certainly respect his right to do that. It's really frustrating because I'd prefer if he was coaching my hockey team.
Here's the thing, and I didn't get a chance to really write about this because enough stuff happened in between that it required way too many changes for what I was drafting over, like this guy being available, that guy, whatever. But I've had this discussion almost every year, and the thing is that there were more. And I guess it depends on who you ask, because some people, you know, and I'm not throwing you under the bus, but you texted me this, so I will entertain. No, so I will entertain it for this reason. But the one that was more realistic was, and we'll get into the playoffs in a second, but the one that was more realistic was Tampa got bounced in the first round. Is John Cooper done in Tampa? And you know there'll be teams lining up, but what I was thinking more of was that was right in the wake of Pittsburgh let Sullivan go. Okay. And I went and looked, and it's astonishing to me that, and we do this almost every year, like especially at the end of a year when coach firings are up higher than they normally are because it's the end of the year and teams are looking to make changes. But do you realize how many of these have happened in like such a short period of time? Like if we just started, with Sullivan being let go, right?
Oh, okay.
If we just started at Sullivan was let go and not including the fact that he already got another job, like that just restarts the clock, right? So Sullivan gets another job. He is now the newest hiring for now until 6-7 other teams decide what they want to do. That would be what? Boston, Chicago, Philadelphia, Seattle, Anaheim, Pittsburgh, Vancouver. So that's 7 other teams that need to make a decision on who their coach is, on top of, you know, and some not by design. Vancouver wasn't firing Rick Tocchet. They wanted to offer him a long-term deal. He said no. Okay.
And for the record, Sullivan went to the New York Rangers. We haven't mentioned
Yes.
that yet. Yes.
Yeah, which was probably one of the most predictable things. I think I had said that to you how many weeks ago?
Yeah.
So that's not really a surprise.
And listen, I gotta tell you, there's a chance the coach firings aren't done. Like I've mentioned it before, and you have remained adamant that it's not going to happen. But I can see a world where if Carolina gets bounced in the second round again,
Right.
they move away from Rod. And I'm
Look,
not saying
stranger
it's
things.
likely.
No,
Right.
stranger things. Sure.
I'm not saying it's likely. But when is the last time the Carolina Hurricanes made it past the second round?
Sure. And well, guess what? You didn't. I think it was you on the last show that floated the idea about Colorado and Bednar.
And I
Which
think it's incredibly not impossible that Jared Bednar loses his job too.
I don't expect it, but at the same time, I'm with you on that. And it's the reason. Listen, there's a reason why I'm highlighting those two names in particular right now. Because okay, let's do the other obvious coaching change that has the potential to happen, and it involves a team we've already talked about a little bit because they just won the lottery. There's a chance that Patrick Waugh is not the head coach of the New York Islanders in a few weeks because it'll be a new general manager. That's the real primary reason, right? Like they've already made a general. They're already looking for a general manager. So that's funny, by the way. The team without a general manager has the first pick.
Well, and listen, I am not a conspiracy theorist,
Mm-hmm.
and I do not necessarily believe this. But it is funny that earlier in the day on Monday,
Is this about the letter?
was it a senator, a mayor, a governor,
Something I know.
some important political figure in New York wrote a letter to the
Like
NHL
yes, and
about how
specifically.
disappointed they were that it's not a traditional all-star game, it's the Olympic kickoff, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
And then they got
And
the
and
pull.
and if you are a conspiracy theorist, if you have your tinfoil hat on, isn't it kind of funny how a couple hours later they jump 9 spots to pick one overall? And again,
Right.
I do not necessarily believe that.
Okay.
It's mostly
So
a joke. I just
let
wanted
me
to
get
bring it
back
up.
into the coaching conversation because we still have
Yes.
playoffs to do too. So okay. I'm using Patrick Waugh in this because he happens to be the first coach hired in this time frame. So this will start you down the path, and it's why I don't think he's as good of a person to talk about with this stuff as the other two guys we just mentioned. This is, and I'm trying to do the count on the fly because it's that many, but we'll get there. I'm going to give you the date that Patrick Waugh was hired by the New York Islanders to be the head coach.
Oh, let me guess. I guess.
Sure, if you want to guess. I was going to give you the date, and the guess I was going to ask you for was, you tell me, including Waugh, how many coaches have been hired for a new job during that time?
I'm going to guess that he was hired. He was a mid-season hire. I'm pretty sure.
I will
Somebody
give
got
you. I will give you that you are correct about that. He
yeah.
was a mid-season.
Somebody got fired and he stepped in. I'm going to go December 10th, 2023.
Not bad. That was
Okay.
you are not terribly far off for picking a date. I will give you that.
Okay, give it
It
to me.
was January 20th to 2024. So you're in the right season. You were about a month early.
I'll take 5 weeks. I'm okay with that. Okay, so since he has been hired, how many coaches have been fired?
How many? This is okay. It's because it's a trick question. Okay. Yes, do that one. How many coaches have been
fired?
how many coaches have been essentially fired or changed since that day, including Waugh?
Okay.
And I'll tell you why it's a trick question in a minute, but
Um 17.
you're not far off. It's 19.
Okay. Okay. And why is it a trick question?
Because technically, if you are going by start date of a coach, it's 20. Because they are considering that since Arizona left the league and Utah is a new franchise, that Andre Tourigny started on April 18th, 2024, when he really had the same job with the same team for several years. So I am not
19.
counting.
Got it.
Yes. So it is 19.
Great.
But But here's the thing.
Barrett
Now,
Hayton has not played for 2 different NHL franchises. Fight me.
anyway,
Right.
no. So then let's start going and let's start adding to the number then. So it's 19, right?
Yep.
Okay. You want to know how many it is since the start of the 23-24 season? So this includes anybody fired after opening night of 2023.
It can't be too many more. I'm going to say 24.
There's 2 more that got fired after
Okay.
opening night. So it's 21 at that point, right?
21.
Okay. How about, you know, where you're closer to being right? Or what did you say, 23 or 24?
Said 24, yeah.
24 is the number of new head coaches that started their job either on opening night, or their first game would have been opening night of the 23-24 season or beyond.
This is insane. Wow.
Like the first head coach that was hot, like, or not the first head coach hired, ready for this staggering one because he's probably going to win an award, so I'm giving it away by saying that. But the first head coach hired in the offseason between the 22-23 and 23-24 season was Spencer Carberry. That was the first head coach hired during that offseason. That was also when I don't remember correctly, like, because it's not going to tell me if this was an interim to whatever, but I think it was. In Nashville, Andrew Brunette was interim to full-time, I believe, correct?
I want to say no, because didn't Barry just step up into the front office?
He might have. I'm just trying to
That
see.
was done, and that was done over the off season. I'm pretty
Oh, no.
sure.
He was with the Devils prior, I think.
Yeah, he was interim to head in Florida when he won the Jack
Sure.
Adams.
Yeah. Right. I'm trying to think.
And then they didn't bring him back, which is insane. But
right, and the other coach of that offseason, by the way, beyond Brunette getting the Nashville job, was Ryan Huska got the Calgary job after they decided, you know, gee, only it's funny how you go there because you're like, yeah, Barry Trotz stepped aside and it's like, okay, you know, or whatever, or no, Barry Trotz took the GM job straight up. I don't think
he
he
stepped
ever.
up. No, he just stepped up.
Right.
Yeah.
But Huska comes in for Daryl Sutter. Like it's all the same people, right? It's all the same people. Because Carberry, because Carberry was after Laviolette, right?
Yep. Yeah, you're talking about all these numbers, all this turnover. It's the same 40 dudes.
Oh, I know.
They just take turns rotating to the bench.
Now by some miracle, by the way, nobody who still has their job anyway, could be different. Maybe there are people who did get fired from this group and the date just changed, but nobody who currently has their job was hired mid-season 22-23. They were all off-season.
Mm-hmm.
So if you can believe that specifically in their current location, not like obviously there's tenure behind some of these names, but the next 3 longest tenured guys, which I believe would be what? 7, 6, and 5, like the 7th, 6th, and 5th longest tenured coaches in the NHL right now are Paul Maurice, Pete DeBoer, and Bruce Cassidy.
See, DeBoer and Cassidy makes sense, but it really feels like Paul Maurice has been in Florida for 2 decades.
Way longer, right?
Yeah. And maybe that's just because he's so incredibly quotable.
Fine. Do you want me to really hit you with a staggering one then? Do you know who the fourth longest tenured head coach is in the NHL right now? And I will give you a hint because it'll make it pretty easy because you'll have a 50-50 shot. He's a Jack Adams finalist this year.
I have no idea.
It's Marty St. Louis.
Okay. That's really funny.
But doesn't it feel like yesterday that St. Louis took over that job? And if it doesn't feel like yesterday that he took over the job, it sure feels like yesterday that he was that threat for losing that job.
Yes, this season has gone very, very well for Marty.
But then you get into the territory of the 3 longest tenured guys, all of whom we've mentioned in the last little segment, which is Rod Brindamore in Carolina, Jared Bednar in Colorado, and John Cooper in Tampa. And that's the list. And Cooper is keeping his job, which but all of this to say, and I know that was a long way around it because I'm trying to explain the coaching turnover, but I respect David Carl's decision so much because if you've got a good thing going in college and you're seeing that the 4th longest tenured head coach was hired not even 4 years ago,
right,
sign the 10-year deal at Denver and settle.
And
happily. And and
Right.
and,
Not,
and I don't mean settle like by money. I'm sure he's making a perfectly
I'm
good
sure
living.
he's doing okay. Yeah. Well, and not only, is fourth that recently tenured, but two and three might be, shucked to the back of the line here before very long.
Right. And
So there's,
then you're
yeah.
looking at essentially almost the entire league having changed coaches after the 21-22 season.
Yep. And John Cooper will stand alone, which is absolutely insane. But
Like if
as
that's
we
the
start,
so
yeah, as
let's
we
do
circle
the
back to the
coaching.
Flyers
Yeah.
here, yeah.
Let's just do any of the updates. So
So
I'm not thoroughly convinced on Tocchet just yet because I don't think it's gone far enough yet. Obviously, you're gonna link like everybody's gonna link the two of them together, and I do believe he will get an interview at some point.
yes.
I've seen some stuff about don't rule out a return to TV for him either, which I can understand as well because you know what? If you just went and coached Vancouver and it wasn't exactly the easiest job in the world this year, obviously, there was a lot of stuff going on. If you also are kind of tired of that lifestyle, he is in his 60s, so maybe you don't mind the idea of I show up Tuesday, Wednesday night, Sunday afternoon, we do a studio show. Okay, cool. Sounds great.
And he sees how much fun Paul Bissonnette's having. Let's be honest.
I think you know who I really think, and I don't know if they're on the panel at the same time too frequently, but I think that he loves the idea of chopping it up with Gretzky still because they had so many on
It's
ice
true.
battles that it's like I just get to hang out with somebody who I feel like who he knows well, obviously, but like
They get they get to hang out and, talk bad about Arizona.
no kidding.
Talk about how challenging it is to be the head coach of the Coyotes.
I think the more significant, and until Tocchet gets like something where we can actually say he had a formal interview, that's when it'll really take shape.
Yeah,
It's
but is he
more
ever gonna have a formal interview? Is he just gonna golf 9 with Jonesy? You know?
well. Then I'd like to know what Pat Firschweiler did for 2 hours.
Well,
Because at least that
Firstweiler didn't play with Jonesy.
yes he did at Western
Oh,
Michigan he
did he?
did.
Oh, I'm sorry, you're right. Not in the
So
NHL.
as far as I'm concerned, that could have been a casual hangout for all I know.
That's an alumni meeting.
Sure. But like what I'm saying is that like that's the first name that we actually got to put interview to because that was a report that was out there. Okay, that's a great place to start. First of all, by the way, I love that he got an interview. I think that that's a great it at least shows you're spanning the horizons here. It wasn't just so fixated on, well, Tocchet's available, and if not Tocchet, then Shaw and Ian LaPerriere, and let's call it a day. No, we're looking at this guy who's the hot, who, you know what? We might as well say it now because David Carl was going back to college the second that we heard the thing about Chicago. He's withdrawn from Chicago. Like, forget it. Remember when because we remember we wondered over, well, he's not going to be the report was he's not going to be a serious candidate for the Philadelphia job. And it's like, well, what does that mean? Does that mean they don't take him as a serious candidate or he's not seriously considering it?
He's not interested.
He
Right.
pulled back from Chicago and now has signed a contract to stay in Denver and says, that's my home. I think we know who wasn't as serious about the job at this point. And I think you can respect, like I don't doubt that every team made a phone call and who had a vacancy and just said, hey,
Why wouldn't you?
what's the situation? And I think he politely declined on all fronts.
Frankly, I wouldn't be surprised if a team or two that didn't have a vacancy called just because hello.
Show who he is. Yeah, I hear you.
Yeah.
So for all intents and purposes, because of that, Firschweiler to me is the hottest commodity out of college.
I agree.
And there's like sure there's other names that are out there and actively available now. They never even got to a point where they were able to entertain Sullivan. Like that was practically off the table before it was on the table.
He wanted to go to New York.
I believe firmly that not even just to say that I wouldn't have even that there wasn't even a phone call to make. I just believe that ship sailed the second that you fired John Tortorella. You knew exactly what that status was with him the second that happened. And like, listen, it's a job. If it was the only job available and you called Mike Sullivan, and I'm sure he would consider it because he likes being a coach, but he had options. And for a little while, at least, there was reports that Tortorella was going with him.
Yeah, I don't know if those were reports or just people kind of making stuff up, but I wouldn't be surprised if John Tortorella takes a little bit of time off and then surfaces somewhere in Mike Sullivan's coaching staff.
Do you know what I believe about the report though? Seriously, like because Emily Kaplan had some of the reports, and I do. First of all, I believe that whatever she puts out is valid, for one.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Also, I believe the part where, because I think the report said they connected, there was a conversation had, and it didn't go to anything, but there was a conversation. Listen, I'll tell you why I don't think the conversation went too far. It's because, I don't think the offer was assistant coach. I think the offer was a management thing. And if you pay attention to, or if you've paid attention to what John Tortorella would say all along about it, is I'm a coach. I'm a coach. I think if he's going to do anything, it's going to be back behind a bench if he's going to do anything. And I don't know, I'm interested in what might happen if he doesn't get consideration for anything, because I do wonder if we see him on our TV screens next year again.
I think he'll be hesitant. I think he regretted that TNT contract shortly after he signed it.
Oh, the ESPN one, you mean?
Or the ESPN one, I'm sorry. Yeah,
Um,
I don't think he liked his listen, you've been in the media room with him.
I know.
How much does he like when people take what he has to say and then tell other people that's what he said? He doesn't like it very much.
No, and I exactly, and I'm not saying that I expect anything from it or anything like that. It was just the thought. I firmly believe Tocchet loves that job and would take it again in a second if it was what he wanted to do. But I think there's also, and again, this is where I come with the Tocchet thing. It's where I come at this crossroads, because what did I say about Tocchet before? That Tocchet could take the same mindset as Danny Briere and Keith Jones and go, I remember when, and I want to bring it back. But he could do the exact same thing with Pittsburgh. I remember when, and I want to bring it back. And you would be trying to bring it back with Sid with you, not the rebuild per se. I mean, Pittsburgh's probably going down that path at some point. They're going to have to. But
so do you hire Phil Kessel as like a skating coach?
Oh, probably not that.
Tocchet's gotta bring Phil Kessel on his staff in Pittsburgh. Come on.
Speaking of staff, by the way, and this has nothing to do with the Pittsburgh staff, but every day that passes, I'm more convinced Bradshaw's at least on the bench next year in some capacity. I don't know if it's head coach or associate again, but I think he is back next year one way or the other, because, well, one, I haven't heard his name for anything else. Like, it doesn't sound like anybody else is reaching out going, well, you're not really in the job yet, so I guess you're available. So that's where it starts. I guess there is a point where I wonder, like I'm not convinced. Like, Firschweiler could have had the best interview out there no matter what, and could still, like, a week or two later decide, hey, that was fun, I'm glad I did it, but I still think I might stay at college instead. Like, I don't know if I want to just, and then you take his name out of the ring. And the more names that come out, if it kind of starts to turn into Tocchet or bust, and Tocchet decides, even, I'm not sure, you might just stick with Bradshaw. Like, it might just be trending down that path, because at least until I hear somebody else. Like, I do know that there was Elliot Friedman on 32 Thoughts floated Jay McKee out there, which is an interesting, different connection, because I feel like for so many of these connections, and it's natural, we've already said he knows everybody, so it's not like it's a surprise. Every time we have a connection story, it's Keith Jones. It's, like, Firschweiler played with Keith Jones at Western Michigan. Tocchet and Jonesy are good buds, like all that stuff. And we're teammates in the early 2000s with the Flyers, right? Like, all that stuff. We don't really pull too many Danny Briere ones. Like, not without having something that Jonesy can relate to, right? Like, if you were going to go down the Peter Laviolette Avenue for a second, you go, yeah, Briere played for him, but Jonesy was broadcasting those games too. So they know each other. They know each other. And you do the same thing with Ian LaPerriere, because it was, yeah, Danny played with him, but Jonesy was broadcasting games at that point. So they know, everybody knows that, like, those connections. And for what it's worth, Jonesy's also dealing with Ian LaPerriere right now. Like, they're all in the same hockey operations department while he's your head coach at the minor league level. I can't think of another, like, of a connection right now with Jay McKee and Keith Jones. That's a Danny Briere connection, and it's an interesting one.
I do have another Danny Briere connection that I want to mention real quick.
Go ahead.
Unrestricted free agent Claude Giroux. Anyway,
well, that's not as a coach. That's a whole different conversation. No. I've seen a lot of that stuff. You know what? Here's the thing. If this team was a little further along in the process, I may not disagree with you on it. Like
I know.
I could see it happening. I will admit, like, no, I shouldn't say I will admit, but like I was having that thought watching that series, and we might start to shift to playoff stuff after this because we don't have many more
Absolutely, we
coaching
are.
names
Yeah.
to say, and we're getting to that point. Actually, not unless really quick. I can pull it up really quick if we need to because I forgot about one other thing that we didn't talk about. So I'll pull this back up on the screen before we get to let's get out of the coaching conversation for although that's
Absolutely. The unfortunate.
we are out of the coaching conversation. You went to a free agent. That's a different conversation. So
Yes.
it's
Well,
shifting.
and just to wrap it up, the unfortunate part is they're being pretty secretive. We don't really know a whole lot. We know about the Pat Firstweiler interview. That's about it as far as coaching news
Do
really
you know?
is.
But do you
I
know
think
what?
we're still waiting to see how things play out. We're waiting to see if Carolina gets rid of Rod.
Well, I think everybody is. I mean, there's to
Of
me
course.
there's one team that seemed like they knew what they wanted to do, and that's what happened.
It was Sullivan in New York, and then everybody else is in a holding
Like the
pattern.
only other thing I think I saw recently, like today, Anaheim is preparing to start the second round of interviews, but but I did see Joel Quenneville linked to Anaheim already, so that might be where that starts to head. Which if that's the case, so be it. Go ahead and let them.
Say yeah.
Yeah, but
Yep.
what was the other one? Boston's still discussing options. Like that Boston was, we haven't formally interviewed anybody yet, but we figure we will soon. That might be exact translation for exactly what you're talking about, which is, hey, the first round just ended. Let's take a couple days to make sure nobody enters the market that we have to consider before we move forward with our list.
All right.
You know, let's
As
can we touch on this really quick, by
yeah.
the way?
Yeah. So it's interesting how you phrased this. The NHL named their Calder nominees. It is Macklin Celebrini, it is Lane Hudson, it is Dustin Wolf, which notably leaves Matvei Michkov out. He was not selected as a Calder finalist. This is something that we've talked about on the show before.
Mm-hmm.
Um, we knew it was probably pretty likely.
Right.
I personally would have him there over Lane Hudson. For positional play more than anything, Lane Hudson was not a very good defenseman. Uh, but other than that, I think it's fairly close. I understand why Hudson is there. I would have liked Mishkov to be there, but I think him not being nominated might be real scary because he's going to be motivated.
Uh, well, you know what was interesting about this? Truly, I couldn't believe. I don't want to say couldn't believe, but like, I was not surprised that this happened the way that it did. I don't think a lot of people should have been, and the outrage over it.
I don't
No,
get it.
well, no, it's not that I don't get it. I knew people were going to be upset about it. Like I even said you could make the argument both ways, right? Like he should have been the third guy in for how he finished the year. He also, may have come up short. I'm not dismissing that. This was out basically at the same time as the draft lottery odds, and for a little while, I felt like I wasn't seeing as much about the lottery and more about this. Like,
Yeah,
like,
people got
like,
very
like,
upset about this.
and it's not to say like, okay, in the moment, be upset about it. I'm not saying don't be upset about it, but like, I looked at the bright side right away, which has always been he's going to be motivated as hell next year.
He sure is.
Like, I know he says he didn't care about that type of stuff. It's going to still sit with him that the rest of the league didn't feel, whoever voted for this didn't feel he was deserving of the top 3 among rookies when he led the league in goal scoring for rookies. Like,
Yep.
Like he's going to be motivated. You just know he's going to be motivated.
Absolutely.
And that's the thing. Like, I didn't get that at all. I did not understand at all how this created that. One, I felt like it was trending that way because there's no way around it. You played as a rookie. You're playing on a team coached by John Tortorella. Your role is, from an offensive standpoint, you are being probably held back a little bit because you're trying not to constantly make that mistake.
At least at the start, for sure. I think
Sure.
the reins loosened up later in the season.
Right. And in the meantime, you've got Hudson's going to win the thing because he helped. Not only did he have a great year, but he willed his team to the playoffs. So he's going to win the thing. Dustin Wolf nearly gets Calgary to the playoffs on a team that had no scoring whatsoever. Like
He was insane.
he needed to
Yeah.
be as good as possible every single night for them to even have a chance. And then
he was.
Celebrini had the same number of points and was one goal less than Michkov and played fewer games because of an injury. So it's like I understand the logic. That's what I'm trying to get at, is like,
absolutely, me too.
And I just don't care. I don't care that, like, I don't think it affects. First of all, one, I don't think it's going to motivate him, but I also think it's not going to affect him one way or the other. You know what I mean? Like,
listen, the rest of the league is on notice. Next year, the Philadelphia Flyers will contain a motivated Matvei Michkov, and that is spectacular. Hopefully, what the Philadelphia Flyers will contain next year is a playoff caliber roster. I don't know if it's going to get there. You can argue what you want about the tank, etc. I'm just using that as a transition here. So, as we talked about on last week's show, we talked about the first round ending, the second round preview. We are now in the second round here. So, obviously, one game happened last night. We are recording on Tuesday night. There is another. Is there one game tonight or two?
There's two tonight, right? But one is active as we're doing this, and another one is to come. I put my stuff out. I put my stuff out there already just to get ahead of it, because it was like I like to stay true to what I say in the beginning and not go off of, hey, I saw even just one result. So,
absolutely. Well, we typically start east to west. You want to mix it up a little bit this time?
We can do whatever you want to for the recap. I didn't want to spend tons of time on the recap stuff. I was
getting into a second round preview for sure.
Absolutely. I figured we were going to touch on at least some of the results and some of the series, because there was some good stuff. I do want to mention, by the way, we both had pretty good first rounds here.
Yeah.
You had like 5 series dead on, I think.
Absolutely. So listen, why don't we have a gambling sponsorship yet? Hit us up. We're at YWT Podcast.
Yeah, because we both got one series wrong, and I feel like it was, well, yours wasn't as go out on a limb as mine was. I legitimately acknowledged I made an upset pick and it didn't pan out. It came close, honestly. It came closer than people think, because mine was Ottawa over Toronto, and Game 6 they were sweating it out for a while.
And if Ottawa wins that game, forget about it.
I know, going to a Game 7 in Toronto with everybody clenched as tightly as possible.
Yep,
it's happening again.
And Brady Tkachuk with a license to kill because it's Game 7. Oh yeah,
right. I mean, the funny part is one of the things that I was correct on, you were almost entirely correct on it too, because your only one was your only series wrong was Tampa over Florida, and you picked that in 7 anyway.
Yeah.
What I was right about is I had 4 really short series on the other side. Like, I just didn't. The East was like, hey, can we just get to the good part at this point? Like, can we get the teams that we know are, maybe in your words, not frauds, and move on to the. I'm saying that jokingly, because I certainly didn't think Tampa was.
Montreal probably overperformed to get where they got.
They did, but I want to get, like, Montreal was in multiple games in that series that just didn't go their way. Like,
those were tough games. That was really, really phenomenal playoff experience for that roster.
They almost played out that series exactly like what I said after the first game of it, which was, it felt like the Flyers playing the Capitals in 2016, where it's like, you're there, you're in it, you're going to take this thing 6 maybe, but you're going to fall short. But like, what building blocks are there, and
great experience.
Yeah, they'll be better for it for sure, especially with all, like, you're going to have the Calder Trophy winner on your roster. You've got tons of other talent. Next year, think about it. Next year, you're going to get a full year of Demidov too.
Yep. Yeah. With a full offseason leading up to it. Yes.
Exactly. I mean, well, and you were doing it after losing your goalie. Like, if Montembeault can play for the rest of that series, I'd love to see what would have happened.
Yeah.
But anyway.
Yeah, do you want to get started with these second round matchups?
Well, no. So I was still finishing up on the East really quick, and
absolutely.
I was going to do the West, because I think I had more fun watching the West to a degree. I mean, I liked the Toronto Ottawa series. I thought that was good. we knew what we were feeling about the Carolina Jersey series. That was, cool, cool for Jersey to make me right and get one because it very well could have been a sweep. Let's be real.
Rods.
Like I said, I think that 4-1 for Washington was a lot closer than people are going to imagine it to be.
Same with Florida and Tampa too.
Same, but also I feel like again I was a little validated with them when I feel like the mileage is catching up with that Tampa team, and
So they've played a lot of hockey.
And don't get me wrong, like I'm gonna tell you, watching what I didn't see completely all of game 1 of round 2 there, but I would worry about that catching up to Florida because Toronto doesn't. Toronto keeps getting bounced early enough.
They don't have those miles.
Florida's doing the same thing that Tampa did, essentially, with one exception in that they didn't win 2 in a row. You've gone to the last game of the year 2 seasons running.
Yeah, we can't keep talking about this series or I'm gonna have to spoil stuff. Let's get out to the West.
I'm one of I got this series right ultimately, but I was really disappointed in the LA Kings.
Yeah, that was about what I expected from LA.
They take a 2-0 series lead though, and then just looked lost for the rest.
Hockey.
Right. Yep. Kind of felt bad for Minnesota because I thought that they had a better chance at it than 4-2. That series.
Absolutely.
That was way closer to the 7-game series I thought it was going to be. I almost want to I almost just want to focus on the top 2 in this thing because the 2 game 7s we did get were outstanding.
Mm-hmm. Oh my goodness gracious! I want to talk about Dallas and Colorado first, just because it was the less dramatic of the 2 games. Insane to say,
the less dramatic of the 2 games, but also to me the proof of I hate when they do this in the first round. I hate it.
Well, right, and well, that's what I was kind of going to get into on Minnesota. Is like, yeah, they got a really tough draw playing Vegas, but look at the West and show me an easier matchup. Like there really isn't one.
Yeah, well, I feel
the West is insane.
I feel not less bad for Minnesota, but I understood how they drew that situation when they had guys out leading up to it, and it's like, okay, listen, you fall where you fall when you have to play the season you play. Dallas and Colorado are second and third with really good regular season records, and they end up having to play each other when they're both in the top 10 in the league standings because this is how we do this. Like,
we get that.
It's great. It's great theater for a game 7. It's also terrible that one of those 2 teams has to be out before the final 8 because they're probably both good enough for it. Like,
can I tell you something?
Yeah.
1 through 8 this year would have given us Winnipeg, St. Louis.
Okay.
Vegas, Montreal. Dallas, Edmonton, and LA, Colorado. It's not that much different. I mean, it's really not. I get what you're saying. I am a fan of 1 through 8, generally speaking, but I'm looking at the West going, there are 6 absolute monsters in this conference.
For sure.
There's no easy matchup.
Well, because you can also look across the board here and take your pick over Makar McKinnon in Colorado, Eichel in Vegas, Kaprizov in Minnesota, McDavid and Draisaitl in Edmonton. Like you can pull legitimate superstars out of all of these teams. I didn't even mention Dallas like that. What scares me about Dallas, and this is a little nod to the second round, but it's a credit to their first round performances, to do it without Robertson and Heiskanen. The whole series. Like at one point in time, at least we thought, okay, Robertson may not come back because he was out right as the series was going to start. But we thought this is what it was building towards with Heiskanen, and it's like, no, he's not back, and he's still not back for a game 7 even, and they still find a way to win it. And of all people to do it, it's the guy you acquired by proxy, because you certainly wouldn't have acquired him directly from Colorado, but you had to go through Carolina to do it.
Going into the weekend, if I told you, hey, tomorrow night, Mikko Rantanen's going to score a hat trick in the 3rd period. The Dallas Stars are going to erase a 2-goal lead and win in regulation. And oh, by the way, that's the 2nd best game this weekend.
I know.
Okay, because that all happened. Mikko Rantanen had the performance that I swear Walt Disney himself came down and wrote. And it's not even the most insane comeback of the weekend. Because Sunday evening you have game 7 between Winnipeg and St. Louis.
So here's the thing with both of these. It's 1-0 Colorado going to the 3rd period of that game. So there was an element of that game that I'm still like, it's very like it's riveting. Like it's a 1-0 game. This is all you could ask for, whatever. I'm watching the other game, the Winnipeg St. Louis game, and when St. Louis scored in the final minute of the second period, when Radek Faksa scored, I'm thinking that's it.
Yep.
Because that one, a goal in the last minute of a period is kind of a dagger to begin with.
Yep.
And I just don't, I thought for sure this was the end of it. And I'm not going to lie, like, because the third period, it took until the final 2 minutes. It's like, this is kind of a boring third period where everybody's just doing what they're supposed to do with a 2-goal lead. And then it got, obviously, you got what you get what everybody wants, which is game 7 overtime, like double overtime, no less. And I almost can't think of anybody better to get that goal than Adam Lowry, because it's like the captain, the guy who's like kind of an unsung hero for that team, does all the little things. Just awesome. So it sets the stage for us to get to round 2 here and really.
The most insane comeback. Real quick. Vlad Domestikov scores with just under 2 minutes left. Cole Perfetti scores with, what was it, 1.6?
That's what it said on the board. I think they might have adjusted it. They might have adjusted it slightly afterwards, but and
less,
on like
less than 3 seconds left.
And on like one of the most broken plays you're gonna find, because Ehlers fans on the shot.
On the shot point. Yep. The point shot. Yep.
Well, and then Kyle Connor doesn't even do what he wants to.
No.
On the centering pass. That looks weird as it gets to Perfetti. And it's like everything, shapes up a different way with that. It was just remarkable that they actually pulled that off and then go on to win the thing.
I got to tell you, the reaction videos from St. Louis fans. Oh, that was so much fun.
But I'm sure.
Moving forward, we do have some second round matchups. We're going to stay out west and start there before we work.
Oh, you want to start out west? I'm sorry. I was on the east side.
No, it is totally fine.
We'll go to the west. I can
I was
thinking
we work our way backwards here a little bit.
Right,
we will start. Yeah, we can start with Vegas Edmonton.
Yeah.
Honestly, I mentioned that there were 6 absolute wagons out west.
Yes.
And the 2 non-wagons lost in the first round. So every matchup here in the West could be a Stanley Cup final, honestly, if the league were formatted differently.
Sure.
This is the Vegas Golden Knights and all their star power, and the Edmonton Oilers and all of their star power. These are 2 teams that have been very successful over the last handful of years.
Mm-hmm.
This is a series, man. Who you got?
It's going to be, to me, this is a 7-gamer because it could be either side. I am leaning the defending Western Conference champions here, but I wouldn't be surprised either way. I've toyed for a little bit. I might have written it down and changed it 3 or 4 times. That's how close I think the series could be. There's one caveat on this that I will say, though, and that's, I don't know how far into the playoffs Edmonton's going to be able to really go with Cal Pickard as their starting goalie before the carriage turns back into a pumpkin kind of deal. But man, I find it like you're not going to find many teams out there, like, I guess, unless they were in the Eastern Conference and won their series quickly. Nobody in the West really went on a multiple game run to win a series. Edmonton won the last 4. It's like, if you're on a little bit of a roll right now, I kind of like what that means for you. So I'm going to say Edmonton in 7.
Okay.
Even though that's not what Flyers fans want to hear, by the way.
No, absolutely not. So I do agree that I think this one's going 7.
Okay.
Where's game 7?
It's in Vegas, in the Fortress.
The Fortress. And listen, this is not me saying anything about Edmonton's ability to go on the road. They just took 1 game in LA off of one of the best home teams in the NHL. So they can certainly go on the road and win hockey games. I'm not saying that. But Vegas is starting to get that reputation, man. There's an atmosphere in the air when it's Vegas. Yeah. It's game 7. It's in the Fortress. The drum line's going. They're pulling out all the stops. The Knights doing crazy stuff pregame on the ice. That building is starting to get special.
Sure. The only thing I'll say about for Vegas' standpoint is I would not want to be, and LA did this a couple times because there were a few games out of that series where it was like, hope you bet the over,
Oh yeah.
I wouldn't want to get into that kind of series with Edmonton.
I agree.
That's the one thing. If Vegas kind of locks it down like they did against Minnesota a couple of times, then I feel more confident in what they have the potential to do here. But if it turns into one of those scoring series, and I don't even, there's almost an element where Draisaitl was almost, not I want to say better than McDavid, but it was like both of them had their moments, and sometimes it was Draisaitl who's like, I'll put this on my back, thank you very much, and sometimes it was McDavid. It's like, and I'm not gonna lie, Evan Bouchard had a killer series as well. So like, you're
after a
building
couple
on.
of bad giveaways, but
Well, yes, but you know what? It comes to the territory with him because he puts up so many points that like you're not getting the best defensive player. That's for sure.
you know who the X factor is in this series?
Is it Cal Pickard?
It's Evander Kane.
Ooh, I do like it. Yeah, I mean,
Because I think Vegas's strength here is going to be in the physical game, hitting the body, wearing them down, blocking shots. And Evander Kane is going to be the Edmonton Oilers' biggest tool to fight back. And I think if he can,
it doesn't hurt.
If he can do so effectively, I think they have a real chance.
It doesn't hurt when your captain's one of the guys with the most snarl in the league to begin with. When you got Mark Stone on the other side,
That is true.
So like that kind of rubs off on everybody else as you go down the pecking order there. So I get that. That's a good point. I agree with that. So that's fair.
I do think it's a hell of a series. I have Vegas in 7.
Okay. Yep. So we're in agreement of 7 games though, and like I said,
we both have that as a coin toss situation typically.
Sure.
So
all right, yeah. On to the next one.
One more series out west, and then we'll kick back over to the east here. We got the Winnipeg Jets and the Dallas Stars. Now, if you've been listening to us all season, and quite frankly, if you've been listening to us for the entire life of this show, you know who I'm going to pick here. So I'll let you go first, Kevin.
Well, then if people have been listening long enough, they know who I'm going to pick too. They should know.
That's true.
This is so for one, I do think that having to play, it was pretty close to 2 full extra overtimes. There was under 4 minutes to go when Adam Lowry scored. So you played a lot of extra hockey to get to the end of that 7-gamer to begin with. That's one. Mm-hmm. Don't get me wrong. Dallas played a lot of hockey too, obviously, and had to really spend a lot in that third period, but just a little bit of extra time, a little bit of,
Okay.
Well, and not only that, but the possibility, like I think Robertson's got a chance of coming back immediately for game 1. Heiskanen still remains on the table there. Like they're only getting better with the additions. And now Winnipeg is like in an unknown state with Scheifele might be out for part of this series. Josh Morrissey left game 7. That might be an underrated factor as well, that Morrissey left game 7 and those other 5 guys had to play the rest of that thing and are spent. So, and I just worry about, like, if they don't pull off the dramatic comeback, 2 goals in the final 2 minutes of regulation and then win it in double overtime, when we were just talking about the series and how great game 7 was and all that stuff, we would have been talking about what happened to Connor Hellebuyck.
I was going to mention up until literally overtime of that game 7, Connor Hellebuyck was pretty bad for large chunks of the series.
Somebody had that he said after the second period, they're not scoring another one. So it was basically a find a way to score 2 and get it to overtime, and I'll take care of it. And that's how good of a goalie Hellebuyck is. I mean, Hellebuyck, he's going to win. Hellebuyck's going to win the Vezina. We know that. And he got a nomination for the Hart. Like that tells you what kind of year he's had. I just worry about a team that now has a little, I don't want to say like a little more firepower, but kind of does to a degree, right? Like Dallas has a lot more depth. You're going to see that. I think, especially the way, what is it? Rantanen has 8 points in the last 2 games because he had a 4-point game in game 6 and they lost. And then he had a 4-point game in game 7 and they won. You still haven't even. I mean, and you've gotten like those little contributions from everybody else. Wyatt Johnston had a great series also, of course, but like everybody else was like chipping in just slightly, right? Like, oh, you get, here's one from Jamie Benn. Here's Tyler Seguin. Here's Mason Marchment, like little insert this guy here kind of material. And then they're getting 2 key players back. And oh, by the way, they have just as good of a goalie on the other side. I mean, and I'm not taking away from Jordan Binnington. He had a really good series, so that kind of plays in too. But I think that Ottinger's like the next guy. We all feel it. We all know it. It's like, so I just think they have a little bit more for them. I think home ice matters in this to a degree, because what I'm giving home ice mattering is I think this is I'm picking Dallas in 6, and I say it ends in Dallas in Game 6.
Now, see, that's funny because I think it's Dallas winning in Winnipeg in Game 5.
Wow, you're going that
Da-
short of a series.
Dallas in 5. I think they have the physicality to absolutely bring it to Winnipeg in a way that St. Louis also did, but I think they just have more skill
Well,
than St. Louis does, and we saw how much trouble St. Louis gave Winnipeg. I think the Dallas Stars take care of this one, and quite frankly, I don't think it's particularly close, especially if Connor Hellebuck looks anything like he did for the majority of round 1.
well, see, that's going to be the key for Winnipeg is if they're going to
Mhm.
win Game 1, they need Hellebuck to look really good to kind of take that out of play. Because if they lose Game 1 and he doesn't look good in the process, it's going to start all over again, and then you've already given up home ice at that point. So it all comes in. It all comes into
If he
play.
lets up, yeah, if he lets up 3 in the first period of Game 1, it might be Dallas in 4.
Yeah, we'll
So,
see. I
like,
mean,
and
the
I don't
amount of times he got
necessarily think that's
no,
likely.
you're valid for the amount of times he got pulled in round 1. That's the thing. Like, it wasn't just he didn't play well. He got pulled multiple times. That's the
Exactly.
hard part.
Yep.
You know, I mean, listen. The funny part is like because I could sit there and say there's also like there is of course there's a world where I see Winnipeg winning it and also kind of making things super interesting because could you kind of imagine if the one thing that everybody talks about when the playoffs roll around is the Canadian teams, if we got a Winnipeg Edmonton conference final and Toronto's on the other side too, and it's like
It'd be kind of crazy.
3 out of 4 are there, and it's like, hey, you've got a shot of getting an all Canada Stanley Cup final where it's going to be over, like,
Right. The drought is over.
the funny part is that like I keep coming back to what Winnipeg in 7, I guess, if that would be the case. Like I'm still picking Dallas in 6, and then in my head, and I go, would you pick against Dallas in a Game 7? Pete DeBoer doesn't lose Game 7s.
Right.
Like the guy doesn't lose in Game 7.
If you've been listening to us for a while, you know that I'm a bit of an MMA fan. And when I'm analyzing fights, trying to think about who's going to win, I think to myself, what is this person's path to victory? Are they going to outstrike? Are they going to wrestle? How are they going to get the job done here?
Right.
And I look at this matchup and I look at the Winnipeg Jets and I think about what their victory conditions are as far as the series goes. And it's like, well, Connor Hellebuck's got to be prime Connor Hellebuck, or else this
Sure.
conversation doesn't even really get going. And then they still have to get Scheifele healthy and or Morrissey healthy and get some contributions from like there's a lot of work that they have to do.
Well, so it's role reversal now because Dallas could be in the Colorado position where it's like, hey, you get it's not an equal comparison per se, but it's like you're gonna here you get your Landeskog back, if you will, and the other side's
Yeah,
dealing without their Robertson and Heiskanen almost, right?
exactly. Yep.
Like, and so that it's interesting because if Winnipeg does pull it off, it's like, well, that's even more impressive. Now I give them even that much more of a shot against whoever's next because they got through that adversity. I feel like Dallas is almost poised to go on a run now because you did get through the adversity. If you get those guys back, it's like, they're fresh. They're ready to go. Like this could be, it could be huge for them now because I could have seen especially with the way that the game was shaping up. Because again, McKinnon early third period, it's like that's it, right? Like it feels like that's it, and then Rantanen turns that game on its head.
Did you hear McKinnon? I don't know if it was post game or at like locker clean out, but they asked him, how he felt about the loss, and he very bluntly
I don't
said,
know where we're going from here.
we lost. They didn't have their best center and their best defenseman, and we still lost. It's not good enough. I don't know where we're going from here.
Exactly. Oh
And
yeah, that was
I
post
gotta
game, by the
tell
way.
you, if that's not a guy who thinks his coach is getting fired. Okay. Anyway,
No, I hear you. And that's interesting. Like you're right about that because what else are they going to do player wise? I mean, short of they fell into this case where you can make what it feels like is every right move. You go out and you get Brock Nelson, for example, and he did nothing in the series. And sometimes that happens. And like, I'll transition you to the next series because I'm going to go to a team that traded for somebody who doesn't score goals, doesn't do anything like that, but he's on the ice at the end of a clinching game and blocks a shot that helps you win. You know what I mean?
All right, so we both have our predictions for this. You had Dallas at 6, I had Dallas at 5. But yes, the player you're talking about is Scott Lawton, who was on the ice for some huge moments in that first round, including a clutch shot block that ended up, leading to the empty net goal that iced the series for them. The Toronto Maple Leafs move on for the second time in recent history
Yep.
to face, quite frankly, the same team, the Florida Panthers. Florida played Tampa, as we discussed, kind of walked through them pretty easily.
Yeah.
Tampa played Ottawa, had a little more of a struggle, threatened to choke it away, but for the most part handled business. Toronto, Florida. It's a rematch from a couple of years ago in the second round.
Hmm.
You know what? I think I'm going to go ahead and start this one. I think I've tossed the first two to you, so I'm
Okay.
going to start. I'm going to start here, and something you mentioned earlier was playoff mileage, and you mentioned that the playoff mileage was catching up to the Tampa Bay Lightning, and you could kind of see that in that series. And you mentioned to be on the lookout for that in this series, and I'm going to go ahead and tell you, I do think it catches up to them finally.
Hmm.
They've played a lot of hockey over the last couple of years. I'm going to speak as though game one hadn't happened yet, as best as possible.
Sure.
There's some things at play there that may change this prediction.
In
But preseason, I had the Tampa Bay, or I'm sorry, the Toronto Maple Leafs winning in 6 games.
this
Uh,
in
that
this series.
in this series,
Okay.
yes. That being said, game one may have changed that depending on the health of Anthony Stolarz.
Well, I was going to
Uh,
say it changed one of your other bold predictions from the other show we did.
yeah, no discipline for Sam Bennett, but
No,
yeah.
apparently
What do you
not.
got? Yeah, what do you have in this one, Kevin?
Well, I'm sticking to my guns as well because I had Florida going back to the Cup final this year, so I'm picking Florida, and I had
Okay.
Florida in 6 because the reason why I picked Florida in 6 for this one is because I kept I watched as Toronto kept flirting in that series against Ottawa with one mistake away because there was overtime games involved. They were looking down the barrel of a 3-3 series potentially when, and to their credit, when it came down to it, they pulled out game 6 and they ended it right there and took all doubt away. But it's, two of those games go to overtime while you're still trying to, as you go up 3-0 and then you did lose 2. It's like you're 2 mistakes away in game 2 and 3 from the series being over in 5 and you losing in that capacity. Like that's how close that series was. And I like Florida's depth in this case because I do think that that's where the mileage doesn't catch up to them, is that they have guys who don't play on the team or didn't play on those teams that now do, that I kind of look to, and I kind of wonder if there's a possibility that something helps out
Yeah,
there a little bit.
but like, who are you talking about? Just for example, guys like Bennett and Kachuk
No,
and
it's not those guys.
Barkov.
I'm talking
Right,
about
all
more.
those guys have been here. The big major parts towards the top of their
Sure, no,
lineup have been
and
there.
so I'm down the lineup. I'm talking about like
Right.
Anton Lundell or Mackie Samoskevich. Like those are the
Okay.
guys that I sit there and I look to be like, you help kind of keep the motor going. Like you might be leaned on a little more than expected, honestly. Like,
Absolutely.
like I can't, if I'm Paul Maurice, I can't just go out there and say, let's just throw Matthew Tkachuk out there at every possible moment, knowing he didn't play at the end of the regular season. I can't do that and expect to get by in the conference final. There's going to have to be a little bit of discipline there with that. It's just, and maybe Toronto's built for it differently. Something that's interesting about, and I'm just going to say this specifically about game 1, and I'm going to do a Flyers thing with this because it's rubbing something in that I think is important to the draft
Talking about
conversation we
you
had.
talking about the goalie matchup?
No, it's not the
Oh,
goalie
okay.
matchup.
The
No,
goalie
because right.
matchup being Stolarz versus Bobrovsky, and my heart hurts.
No, do you know? No, do you want to know why I don't like that either? By the way, because
Okay.
nothing against like right away. Everybody's going to point out that Stolarz was starting game 1 for Toronto in a second round of a playoff series, and it's like he wasn't that level of good here, and then
I
he
think they
made like
gave up on
3.
him too early.
Maybe they did, and well, I've seen some people who point out the reason why maybe they gave up on him is because hello, you had Carter Hart in the system, and you thought that was the answer.
Well, and Anthony Stolarz at the time you moved away from him had some horrendous injury history. Like I certainly
And
understand
well,
why you
and
did
still,
that.
to be honest, and still does. And well, and to
Well,
be
sure.
fair, at the time that you moved on from him, this is one of my points with goalies, by the way, is Stolars is what now? 29, something like
So
that.
he was like 25 when you bailed on him.
But
23.
he's made more stops than that just to be the backup. Like it didn't work out in Anaheim. It didn't. He wasn't gonna be above Bobrovsky in Florida when he played there. It's like, he was headed down the path of, yeah, okay. This year it looks rough because he had a good year as primarily a starter, but not.
Yeah,
Most of
and
the years he was a good backup, which is what he probably was for you.
absolutely. And obviously, as time has gone on, it would have proven a little different. But
No,
yeah,
the
you
player
can't
I
play the
went
what if game. Yeah.
no, the player I was going to refer to, by the way, is that when we talk about the Toronto Maple Leafs, we talk about the core four, right? It's always the core four. It's always Austin Matthews. It's always John Tavares. It's always William Nylander. It's always Mitch Marner. Those are the four guys, right? And I don't know.
I think a lot of Leaf fans will tell you 5 and put Riley in there.
Okay, maybe so from a defensive standpoint, that's fair.
As far as the core.
I'm just sticking with the forwards for a second because
Okay.
the funny part is I'm starting to think it's a core five.
I know the answer.
Go ahead.
It's Matthew Nyes.
Yeah, sure it is.
He's so good.
Now, do you want me to? Here's the poll. Do you know
Yep.
where Matthew Nyes was drafted?
Okay.
Because no arguing. He's kind of emerging now, right? He's becoming a guy
Breaking
on this
out.
team, right? He's having a
Breaking
breakout
out.
year, right? Matthew Nyes was drafted 57th overall, which is a second round pick in 2021. Do you know? And I hate to do this because it always is on the bad side, but first of all, why does that draft year stand out from the Flyers' perspective? Number one, and then I'll give you the other part that's going to hurt your heart.
I do not remember.
The reason the 2021 draft stands out from a Flyers perspective is because that was the year that Chuck Fletcher traded the first round pick for Rasmus Ristolainen.
Oh yeah.
So they didn't pick in the first round, which, by the way, the first round, the pick was 14th, by the way.
Okay.
That produced names like, now if you just watch St. Louis have a really good series, by the way, it produced names like Zach Balduke, who was 17th overall. It produced a name I already mentioned for this particular series, Mackie Samoskevich at 24th overall. Maybe if you're interested in the defensive side, it produced a name like Owen Zellweger for Anaheim, who was picked 34th overall. And I skipped over one person in particular because we already talked about him, and we know both are really high on him. It also produced at 23rd overall, one Wyatt Johnston. So the Flyers' first pick of that draft was in the second round at 46th overall. So Matthew Nyes was taking 11 picks after the Flyers made a selection. The Flyers selection was Samu Tuamala. Do you know who, and here's your transition, do you know who the next player taken in the draft was? I will give you a hint, by the way. That was also a Dallas Stars pick.
I'm gonna go, and I don't know the answer. Was it Alexei Protas?
No, because Protas was always a pick of the.
Oh, he was a Caps pick.
Yes,
Okay.
I believe so.
Okay, who was it then?
It's funny because did you? Let me ask a question as we shift to this one.
Absolutely.
Did you
But
guess
by the way, you had Florida in 7, you said?
6.
Florida in 6. Okay.
Did you guess Protas because he scored tonight?
I mean, I guessed Protas because I thought he was drafted around that time more than anything.
He was a mid-round pick. I will give you that. Yes, he was.
Well,
He was
and
in
I,
those,
I think I think a similar year too.
sure.
Yeah.
I mean, I might be able to find his name as I scroll down here. To be honest with you, it might
Okay.
pop up as I go. I'm not going to worry about it right now. No, the player I'm
I'll take a
referring
look
to,
at that.
the player who I'm referring to has the other goal in the Washington Carolina game 1 so far. That's Logan Stankoven.
That's really funny. That is incredibly funny. Stankoven obviously making his way to Carolina as part of the Mikko Rantanen trade.
Mm-hmm.
That is very funny.
And looking every bit like he fits the part there too, right?
Oh, absolutely.
So that's all I'm saying is, like, it's there, people. It's there. You just got to find the right guys.
I'm sorry. Protas was drafted in 2019, the
Oh wow,
third
so yeah, it's
round.
well,
Yeah.
you know what though, because he's another Russian prospect too, so it's a
Yeah.
there was
Yeah.
a timeline there for him to
And
play, and
I get what you're saying. Just factually, he is actually Belarusian.
oh well, he played in the
Yes,
KHL for a while,
he
didn't he?
did. Well, he played in the WHL and then he went to the KHL. So
Okay,
he,
but
he kind of has a
there was
little bit of a
I knew there was
hybrid.
a KHL, but what I'm talking about is I knew there was a KHL buffer that led to the NHL.
He did play a full season for Dynamo Minsk. Yes, that is
Okay,
correct. Yes.
I knew there
Uh,
was some coaxing to get him over, before he was fully into the NHL. Now he's having a killer year. So like,
Absolutely. And moving into this season, moving into this series rather, I really do think Alexi Protas is one of the reasons why I have Washington winning this. Spoiler alert.
okay,
I think they've done a great job this year of almost kind of recreating that first year Vegas Golden Knights team, plus Alexander Ovechkin. Remove him, but like
right.
the rest of their roster seems like a bunch of scrappy. We didn't fit in anywhere else, so we're gonna excel here type of guys who are all having kind of career seasons at the same
It's
time,
it's half
and
that and half like the
what
guys
they've
that just
established.
well no
They've
it's
just been there.
but it no it's half like guys that you didn't see emerging taking huge steps. Like Connor McMichael kind of comes from out of nowhere as part of this thing and is like
Yep.
way more legitimate numbers than you would have expected. And
Protus is another one.
Protus is
Same
another
deal.
one. And then you do actually take one of those high end prospects and insert him immediately. Ryan Leonard gets to do this. Okay,
Yep. Well, and also, by the way, let's be honest. That whole team has spent the whole year not really thinking about their position in the standings. Right? Obviously, you're playing well, you're winning, and that's all a lot of fun. This whole team's focus the whole year was getting Alexander Ovechkin that goal record, and they did it. So now I think they're kind of just playing with house money and along for the ride, and you're just kind of letting the momentum carry you as far as possible.
sure,
And then on the other side of the matchup, the Hurricanes have concerned me. They've
sure.
they've had fraud-like tendencies this year as well,
Just
and
not as
I'm not
much as the team they played in the first round.
I and that's why I'm not calling them full-blown frauds. I said fraud-like tendencies.
Right.
Um, I do have Washington winning this one. I give Carolina some credit. They are a scrappy team. Freddie Anderson is playing really well. I think they stretch it out at least 6. I think there's a real chance it goes to 7, but my official prediction is Washington in 6.
So I'm not going to try to adjust my pick based on what I just saw on the game because it's still a 1-1 game, mind you. It's not like it's a score thing. I didn't realize until I just saw it that Carolina is out shooting Washington in game 1 so far, 31-13 or something like that at this point. So
Well, that's Carolina.
I did not expect that though, like that it was constantly going to, because Washington usually is like it's quality shots, but it's not, it's not that few. Let's just say that. Um,
Yes.
but I'm with you. I worry about Carolina has turned over a lot of the roster. I will give them that. Like it's not the same group that we keep sitting here saying they don't make it to this, they don't make it to that, but
Game 4.
it's mostly there. Like there's enough guys that I can say you've been here, you've done that, and it's
How lo
another.
how long has Sebastian Aho been there? How long has Jacob
And
Slavin been
Andrei
there? How long
Svechnikov
has Andrei
and
Svechnikov been there?
Jordan
Go
Stahl's
on and
been your
on and
captain
on.
the whole time, and you name it.
Yep.
Yes, I got that.
And with all due respect, how long has Rod been
Rod
there?
Brind'Amour been there, yeah, and not gotten to a certain point in this thing,
And
whether it's
not gotten beyond.
past the conference finals or past the second round. It's like they're always here. Um, I'm with you. I feel like Washington's got this slight edge here. I do have it going 7, so I'm picking Washington in 7. So I'm not taking away from the fact that I could be wrong and Carolina could still win this thing. I think that like it. I had a lot more confidence about, and of course, game 1 went to Toronto, but I had a lot more confidence about Florida in 6 than I did about anything I was going to pick for this series. So I could have seen it either way: Florida, Washington, Florida, Carolina, you name it.
Listen, if
I
you
feel like
told
it
me
could go
six
either way.
yeah, if you told me 6 months ago that I'd be sitting here picking a Washington-Toronto conference final, I certainly wouldn't
Yeah,
believe
not a
you.
chance, right?
But All right.
No, but do you know what that equates to though? Give me any combination of this, like all four combinations that you can come up with of like Washington, Toronto, or Carolina, Toronto, or Florida against one of the other side. Like they're all good. Like I think you're going to get a really good conference final. Of course, the West is going to look great because you're going to have four teams that
you have four
certainly belong in the
juggernauts.
conference final. Like I kind of really think, and like I said, I was trying really hard to speak the Kachuk Bowl into existence and have Florida play Ottawa, but I think when it came down to it, you got the 8 best teams playing in the final 8 to get to the conference final now, and it's just going to continue from there, right? Like then we'll be saying it's the 4 best teams, and then it'll be the 2 best teams because it's really going to amount to that.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And that is the absolute best thing about this time of year is the quality of there's a weird thing that goes on where the quality of hockey kind of goes up and down based on just how much damage guys are taking. But generally, the second round is a pretty good cross section of guys are still mostly, relatively healthy, but also you're getting teams who won first round matchups. So it's the quality is starting to get really, really high. There are not any real bad teams left.
No, not at all.
I love where we're at, and watching hockey for the next month and a half is just so much fun.
Oh, of course.
Yeah. And that is where we are going to put a pin in it for today. We will be back after the second round concludes at some point before the Eastern or the conference finals start. Kind of similar thing here. We'll catch you up on your Flyers news. We'll break down the playoff series that have happened, and we'll do a little preview of the ones upcoming. But in the meantime, that'll do it for us here. Make sure you're following us on social media. We're at YWT Podcast. Whenever I can get a game to work, I'll tweet along with it the best I can. Kevin's pretty active during this time. There's a lot going on. Make sure you're following him for Flyers news too. We're at YWT Podcast. He's at Kevin_Durso, everywhere except Blue Sky, where it's just at Kevin Durso. Find us everywhere you find your podcasts, including sportstalkphilly.com, and we'll be back after this round. So until then, we'll see you.